Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, fellow Cambridgianos. Here we are, conjoined unhappily over our grotesque fascination with this meagre BBC political debate, which I'm sure all of you now have seen. You all know what's wrong with this thing. We're all able to see easily and clearly what's happened, but you know, we might as well go through this and put it down on record anyway. So here is a review of the broadcast which went out this morning. We're just going to go through it bit by bit and just point out all the things which are wrong. Okay, so let's go.
How often do you get stuck in traffic like this? Once a week? Twice a week? Every day? Well, this is central Cambridge and it's just normal. But if you had to pay to drive through here, would it change things?
So the programme starts with the standard BBC mashup of imagery and upbeat music. They're obviously framing this thing as a congestion issue, as we're all understanding by now. And here we go, we get into it. The debate starts with a quick rundown of the situation as the best that she could. And she goes on to show us the congestion zone as it's proposed.
So, any car going in or out of here would be charged.
She forgets to mention that everything going through it also would be charged, the £5. She also conveniently forgets to mention that it would be £10 for vans and £50 for lorries and buses, which is something which is consistently missing from any time this is shown in the media, which is just one of those annoying things that we have to live with.
Now, if you're thinking, well, I never drive into Cambridge, so this doesn't affect me, think again, because congestion is everywhere. So this idea might just be coming to a town or a city near you. In fact, we've been to Gothenburg in Sweden, where...
It's not just Gothenburg. I'm just going to pause briefly for a moment to step away from this, just to have a very quick review of all the places in the UK which are having similar measures, not just congestion charges, but low traffic neighbourhoods, clean air zones, and of course the big one in London, the ultra low emission zone. Anyway, here we go. Here she introduces us to today's dynamic panel.
Welcome, everyone, to the debate.
Let's have an obligatory round of applause there. I should point out that I was actually in the audience. This is why I'm doing this, because while I was watching it, obviously I could see all the gaps and the things that they'd missed out, and my mind was going about how I was going to deal with this later on, which I'm doing right now. So we'll go through it. Like I said, here we go.
Now, it was the Greater Cambridge Partnership that has come up with this plan.
I just have to say that I was actually quite impressed. She did very well not to fumble on any of her words. It's something which I do quite a lot. I'm always losing my train of thought and mangling my pronunciation. She's a professional, this lady, and she didn't mess up once. So let me just commend her for that.
And it's hoped it will help fund a world-class bus service and develop more cycling lanes.
Cambridgeshire needs a sustainable travel zone. My name is Roxanne DeBow and I'm the Executive Director of CamCycle.
CamCycle is instrumental in pushing this forward. They have been campaigning and working for or with the GCP in trying to promote cycling needs. I don't know what more needs they have. I always felt that cycling around Cambridge was okay. I've been in Cambridge for many years and I just think that Cambridge is a cycling town. I was never really aware of it being bad or lacking in any way, really. They've got plenty of cycleways and there's lots of people cycling all over the place. But that's just my point of view here. Let's listen to what she has to say.
CamCycle works for more, better and safer cycling for all ages and abilities in and around Cambridgeshire. We're also a founding member of the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance, working for fairer and sustainable travel choices for all in Cambridgeshire. Whatever form of transport you choose, I'm sure you...
When she says fairer transport for all in Cambridgeshire, whatever form of transport you choose, she's obviously not talking about cars, because that is the whole thing of what's going on.
You will agree that our transport systems in Cambridgeshire simply are not working.
I'm just going to skip ahead here. You get the point of that. We'll hear a word from Lucy Kingsford, I think. Let me just double check that name. Yeah, Lucy Kingsford.
It's going to cost £5 every time you take your car in and out of Cambridge if this charge comes in, and I am against it. I'm Lucy Kingsford and I live just outside of Cambridge with my son Leo, and I have to drive back into the city daily to go to work, to see my friends and family, to take my son to nursery, and if this charge comes in, I won't be able to afford it.
I'm sure all of you have actually seen the full broadcast. I don't need to go through every moment of it. I just pause to say here that Lucy has actually expressed her dissatisfaction and frustration with how this thing was edited. She's been squeezed into about 40 seconds, which obviously is very difficult to get the point across. She has expressed and reached out through the Facebook channels that she wishes to do to record her own program, her own video, so that she could actually get her side of it across in a much better way rather than relying on the BBC to edit it all together for her. She has reached out, and there is the possibility that we might be making a video together in the near future. So we will be revisiting Lucy and her story and her point of view at a later date. But for now, let's go back to the studio.
Okay, so let's hear from the man with the plan, shall we? Peter Blake, who's from the Greater Cambridge Partnership. I mean, you came up with the idea. Did you think it would split an audience like this, or split a city?
Amelia, we live in a very successful environment. It's a great place to live, work, get educated. But the challenges that creates around congestion, which you've spoken about, but also quality, transport is a contributor to that, and of course the climate agenda, 35% of greenhouse emissions come from transport.
I'm going to pause it right there. Now, obviously, people have, I know a lot of people have got things to say about Peter. He seems like a bit of an interesting character. Sorry for the unflattering pause moment here. He used to work for Transport for London until about 2017, when he left in under auspicious circumstances. I don't know if I used the word auspicious correctly there, but he left for some reason. And now he's been 5 years working for the GCP, trying to redesign Cambridge's road infrastructure. And just here he says car exhausts make up 35% of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I don't know if that's actually true exactly. Rather than going into the exact percentile figure, all I would say, my feeling about this is that whether it's 35% or not, it might be 30% or 28% or 37%, fine. This project is, firstly, is very, very expensive and hugely costly and very ambitious and elaborate for something which is only going to deal with, or only aims to deal with, 35% of the problem, and even that isn't going to deal with the whole problem, because we know that this isn't going to stop people driving. It's not going to eliminate vehicle exhaust. It's just going to displace them outside of the city. So the whole argument about we need to do this to clean up the air doesn't actually stand, in my opinion, in my view. That's one of the main problems with these congestion charge zones. They don't stop people from driving. They don't eliminate greenhouse gases through car exhausts. They only displace the problem. So overall, you haven't solved anything. And actually what this boils down to is charging people to drive on the roads, creating revenue. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the first question. We're going to kick off the debate with a question from this chap here. Let's listen.
Good evening. I'd like to start off by asking our politicians a very simple question. Do you support or oppose the current sustainable travel zone and congestion charge as proposed, and why?
Straightforward question. Do you support it as it's proposed? Yes or no? If so, why?
What's your take?
Well, good evening. And in answer to your question, I want a transformed transport system for this city.
Okay, as expected, the politician for Labour, Daniel Zeichner, starts off by not answering the question. He launches straight into his pre-prepared spiel about how he wants to improve the buses. Cambridge deserves a top-class bus system, and now is the time to seize the opportunity to make that reality.
People are spending 65 hours a year stuck in traffic jams.
Okay, let's stop there again. 65 hours a year stuck in traffic jams. This is one which has come up, obviously. It's an easy point to call out. Let's just put this into some perspective here. 65 hours in a year. 65 hours is less than 3 days. So you're talking about like 2 3/4 days out of a whole year. Now, that's not actually that bad when you think about it. And then this other comment which just popped up on the Facebook, courtesy of Mac Manning. I thought this was worth quoting here because it's quite amusing, and it does put things into some proper perspective. If you stop at 3 sets of traffic lights for 2 minutes each every day, that would equate to 65 hours in a year. So stopping at 3 sets of traffic lights for 2 minutes every day would equate to 65 hours a year. So that's really got nothing to do with congestion. That's just normal driving. Put it into perspective. Like I said, 65 hours in a year. Why have they latched onto this figure? Do they think that we're dumb? Do they think that we can't work things out on our own? 65 hours out of a year isn't actually really terrible. That's kind of normal. And as we know, Cambridginos, driving around Cambridge isn't actually that bad. Since the new year, it's completely cleared up. Driving around has been easy. It's been a breeze. They've stopped the temporary traffic lights. A lot of those roadworks have ended. And actually driving around is pretty straightforward nowadays. You can do most of your runs. I've driven quite a lot since January started. Completely different atmosphere. So the whole argument or the whole case about Cambridge being this really congested town isn't true. If you live and experience the city as it is, you know it's not true. These people don't live and work and drive around on a daily basis, and they're just plucking out figures and trying to make it seem worse than it is. 65 hours in a year? Well, that's normal if you ask my opinion. Okay, next off we have Liberal Democrat.
Until we get all the results from the consultation, I can't say whether...
Classic response. Until we get the results from the consultation, I can't say. The results conveniently are going to come in June, which is after the election. So I can't say yes or no. I have to wait and listen. Although this woman, Bridget Smith, is and has made it known that she is for the charge. And she is for the plans. As a matter of fact, if you just give me a moment here, I will find it for you. The former Liberal Democrat councillor Dan Lentil, here it is, Dan Lentil, in September, I have just resigned from the Lib Dem group at South Cambs District Council. I will continue to serve our villages, blah, 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 blah. I simply cannot support Bridget Smith's position that our hospitals at Addenbrooke should be included in the congestion charge zone. And here he shares his letter. I'm frankly disgusted as well as disappointed that such a stance is not consistent with membership of the Lib Dem grouping. Basically, he's fallen out with the Liberal Democrats because of their position on the congestion charge. So here you have Bridget Smith saying, I can't say one way or the other, when we actually know that she is in favour of it. So make of that what you will.
They don't have fair access to education, to jobs, to health or to leisure. So we have to deal with that. We also have 25% higher carbon emissions in Greater Cambridge than the rest of the country. The only way we are going to deal with that is to take cars off the road.
Now, there again, she says that you've had 25% more emissions in Cambridge than the rest of the country. Let's just double check that I heard that correctly, because I'm a little bit baffled.
We also have 25% higher carbon emissions in Greater Cambridge than the rest of the country.
She did say it. 25% higher carbon emissions in Cambridge than the rest of the country. I'd have to check that one out, but I'm pretty sure that's not true. So anyway, there's just some waffle. Like I said, the politicians, they're waffling their way as best they can through this thing. They've given their opening remarks. Now we're on to Naomi Bennett from the Green Party, which I think, in all fairness, she probably has the most well-balanced view on this thing, which is she supports the principle, but there are a lot of changes which need to be made to the proposals before they could support it.
We have this consultation is that it's very much a work in progress and not a final product.
Yeah, she reiterates that the consultation is only an early stage of the planning of what the thing will actually end up being, which is sensible, it's fair, it makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, now here you have representing the fourth opinion on here, Lucy Fraser.
I'm totally against the charge, and I am.
Totally against, you see, and she has reasons for it. But to summarise, basically, she's listened to her constituents, and there would be so many of the people who she represents who would be completely done over by this thing, and the buses won't work for them, because how can you have a rural bus service connecting up every area? And she's actually listened, if you can believe that. She is taking the stance that she's listening and representing her people, as radical as that is. If you could believe such a thing, a Conservative MP is actually going to try to represent the views of the constituents who she has listened to. So that is her basic package. All right, I'm going to skip forward now. So we're hearing points of view from the various interested parties. Oh yes, here we go. Adam Brooks guy. Now he says something which is one of the biggest peeves of mine, and I know a lot of people agree with this. He is basing one of his arguments for, or he understands the reason why this is necessary, is because everybody knows traffic is grinding to a halt in Cambridge. Once again, that's not true. But the thing which I picked up on, one of my biggest bugbears about this guy's argument, is this bit.
Yesterday I followed an ambulance out of Adam Brooks. 10 minutes later I caught it up at Lensfield Road on my bike, stuck in traffic.
Lensfield Road. He was saying that there was an ambulance stuck on Lensfield Road. Now, what could possibly be wrong with Lensfield Road? Let's stop for a second here. As we well know, Lensfield Road and Fens Causeway and Trumpington Road and East Road at the moment are all suffering from major congestion as a result of narrowing the roads for cycle lanes with these ridiculous rubber bollards, which has made it from a 2-lane junction into a 1-lane junction. And I and many other people have all been stuck there because the traffic cannot filter off. Here's a diagram which I drew and sent off to the planning people to tell them this is the worst designed junction I've ever seen, and you need to take it away because it's making the situation so much worse. It's increasing the congestion, it's increasing the emissions, it's making waiting times a lot longer, and it's catching ambulances, making them get stuck unnecessarily. And now here's this guy from Adam Brooks saying that's one of the things that they want to have the congestion charge for. Now this plays exactly into the argument and the narrative on the other side, where people are saying that congestion is being artificially manufactured as a way to increase congestion so that they can actually argue for a congestion charge to fix the problem. But the problem has been made, man-made, artificially created by the GCP, either intentionally or through sheer incompetence. I mean, the level of incompetence would have to be so immense that it is unbelievable that is the reason. It would have to be on purpose. I can't accuse anybody of doing that on purpose, but just think, how could you design something so utterly stupid and not know that you're going to make congestion 1,000 times worse by doing it? Anyway, that's the Adam Brooks Hospital guy. I had to just call him out on that. He's there on the BBC saying something which is just wrong. And you heard it.
So how the debate is managed, the information that's given out, and ensuring that people feel listened to is key for us.
Is key, okay.
Ensuring that people feel listened to. Once again, that's a very important point here, and I hope that Peter Blake will take that seriously and that this isn't all just some sham, which is what I think a lot of people expect and think and feel.
Feel about it?
Well, I'm against it because I have seen how the GCP or someone else is closing, narrowing the roads, making them unsafe for the cyclists. I'm cycling myself. I have seen this GCP closing or pretending to close the bridges and the relief roads which are needed for avoiding congestions.
So there he makes the same point that I just made a minute ago. The GCP have closed roads, they've closed through roads, they've narrowed roads, And these are actually needed to alleviate congestion, and that's what's making congestion a lot worse. And he is a cyclist, as a lot of us are also cyclists who are drivers as well. That makes the roads more dangerous, but it's artificially dangerous. So if you've got the GCP making the roads worse for congestion, how can you trust them, or how can you get behind a plan which is proposed by the GCP to help congestion? It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. You know, people are not that stupid. People are not that dumb. We know when something doesn't smell right. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with Acosta there, as I'm sure lots of other people are. Now, let's move on to the next question. Dan Zeichner's attempt to reassure Acosta about what he just said here.
Of course, and I totally understand that. And my position is that we can't have a charge unless we've got a really good transport system in place. And I think most people will agree with that. And that is the challenge.
Okay, we don't need to go too much further into that, because the point is basically sound. From his point of view, you can't start charging people to use the roads unless the bus system is there first. Now, that is quite a big gauntlet to throw down, and I do think this... I managed to have a quick chat with Peter Blake before the event started, and I just said, you know, once this is all said and done, if this all goes through in 8 years or whenever, when you've got it, if anything goes wrong with the buses, you know that you're the one who they're going to blame. You've got a hell of a you've got a hell of a task ahead of you. You've given yourself a very tight time frame to work within, and you've given yourself a really big challenge. You've got to make a world-class bus system before you start charging people to use the roads. That's Dan Zeichner's position there.
The issue is that the proposals that the GCP are putting forward are inadequate to serve my constituents. The demand-responsive transport that they are proposing is untested, is not going to serve my 50 villages. People are not going to get around. So I would love an alternative version to getting around on the car, but the proposal the GCP are putting forward is simply inadequate.
Basically, I think she's saying it's all very well and good making these promises and saying it, but realistically, it's not going to fit the bill, is it? It's not going to do what you say it's going to do. So let's see what happens next.
I mean, the university is actually on the Greater Cambridge Partnership, so you're a fan of the idea, are you?
So the university's given qualified support, and the reason we've done that is, it's already been raised by people actually. The qualification for us is that we need to see the improvements in public transport first. We're talking with GCP about doubling the investment in the bus infrastructure. We're talking about capping fares in the city at £1, within the city £2 for bus.
I'm just going to pause it there, because this is something which I've queried. This whole idea of having a bus system where the fees are capped at £1 and £2. So the reason why they say this is that that's what they call a flagship policy. This is something that political groups or whoever it is with these ambitions, they emblazon that on the front. That is the flagship policy with which that they can boast and try to win support. They say this is going to be great. £1 for a journey or £2 for one of the wider journeys. Now, just when you think about it, capping a bus system for £1 per journey is going to be hugely expensive, so expensive, and that's part of the reason why this is going to cost such a lot of money. Now ask yourself, really, what is the overall benefit of having £1 journeys, you know, as opposed to £2.80 or £3.50? Is that really so necessary, or is it just as a way to make the overall package seem more appealing? And the other thing about flagship policies like this is that they can't possibly last forever. They might last 5 years or 6 years or 10 years, but until the political will dwindles enough, eventually that £1 and £2 journey is going to go to a £2 and a £4 journey. What I'm saying is that it's artificial. It's not real. And that's part of the reason why this is so expensive and, in my view, quite an unbelievable, unfeasible, ambitious project and a proposal that they want to make sound great, when in reality, when you break it down and the economics of it, that's going to be really hard to sustain. You're going to have buses going all over the districts from 1 a.m., from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. for £1 and £2, really. And most of those buses are going to be empty a lot of the time. So you're going to basically be burning money just running buses around rural districts for hardly any gain at all. In the long term, it doesn't pan out, I'm afraid. That's my criticism of that part of the policy. So thanks, Andy Neely from the university, but it doesn't stack up in my view. So let's move on to the next point. Who's that?
I have a number of staff who work for me who are very concerned, saying, how do I get to work? How am I going to be able to afford to pay £5 a day on what are often minimum wage or near living wage salaries just to come to work? It's just not feasible for us.
There's one of the main points there. This is going to be hugely detrimental to people on minimum wage or living wage, people who are just travelling to get to work on a daily basis. This is going to completely devastate their budgets, and the actual burden of expense is just unthinkable, really. That's one of the main points. He's done very well to articulate himself. I always find it quite difficult when I get put on the spot. Anyway, you get the point. He wants there to be a better bus service. He understands and agrees the thing in principle, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to arrive there.
I can see lots of nodding there. It's all seemed to be hinging on, getting that public transport system in place.
And here we're just going to look at some facts and figures with Ben Schofield, who's going to go closer into some of those numbers.
Let's look at those two issues of congestion and pollution. Cambridge in 2022 ranked 15th in the UK for its congestion. It's only been in the top 10 once in the past 5 years. Drivers in Cambridge spent 65 hours last year sitting in congestion, and they say that will have cost £572 for drivers.
Now, I'm a little bit confused as to why they would include this. I mean, that doesn't actually look very good for the arguments of the GCP. £572 is the cost of wasting 65 hours a year, as I said at the beginning. 65 hours out of an entire year isn't actually that bad when you put it into perspective. It is the equivalent of a few normal traffic stops per day if you drive every day. So 65 hours a year equaling £572 in a year is the cost of drivers, but they're proposing to charge drivers £1,200 to £1,300 a year to alleviate that cost. That makes no sense whatsoever. Here is a very nice graphic which one of the trusty members of the group has bestowed upon us here. These are the numbers which he has calculated, because taking into account the taxes which you would have to pay in order to earn more money, if you were being charged £5 a day, it would actually equate to £6.60 a day, and that would be £1,716 per year. So to earn an extra £1,300 is going to actually cost you £1,700, and they're saying that at the moment people are on average losing £500. So I mean, that figure doesn't support or help the GCP's cause very much at all. I just wanted to point that out because that is important to note. Again, we have to get these things into perspective. You can say to somebody, oh my God, 65 hours is so much. It isn't. £500 lost a year is so much. It isn't. That's how much it's going to cost you. If you're a van driver, it's going to be £3,432. I would think I would rather keep it as this, personally. It's just my point of view, that's my opinion. Anyway, let's go on.
They measure something called nitrogen dioxide. That is a gas that's produced when fossil fuels are burned, and the level of NO2 across the city in general has been falling over the past 10 or so years.
Okay, so there's the point about the pollution as well. That was taken from a piece that Ben Schofield did back in December, I seem to remember, about the NO2. Basically, the trend it's showing over the last 10 years has been falling. So the argument that congestion is getting worse is not true. The argument that pollution is getting worse is also not true.
Cambridge is no longer in the top 10 most congested cities in the UK, and actually pollution seems to be actually falling. Did that surprise you?
Well, I think the point he's also made is that Cambridge is set to grow And I'm not particularly in favour of Cambridge growing, to be honest. I think we ought to look after the people that are here already.
Now that's an important point, because this is one of the main thrusts of the GCP narrative and the GCP proposal, is that Cambridge is set to grow by somewhere around 25, 18, 20% or something like that. And that was another thing which was refuted at an earlier point in time in a newspaper by a mathematician, which didn't look very good for the GCP. Maths error casts doubts on graded Cambridge Partnerships road user consultation document. The point is that it was challenged and it was proven to be wrong. It was incorrect. Another thing that was incorrect about what the GCP put out. However, there are going to be more houses built, but the interesting point about that, what is happening here, is that in the GCP's own plans, there are expected to be 33,500 more homes. That's their expectation. Now, what they don't say here is that the same money which has been given by the government to improve the road infrastructure and the buses has been given to build 33,500 more homes. So when they say Cambridge is expected to grow, so we need to improve the bus services, what they're actually saying is that we are going to build this many more homes, so we also need to improve the bus services. It's not like these houses are just going to spring up naturally out of nowhere like mushrooms growing out of the forest floor. This 33,500 is part of the same plan using the same money which has been given to them. So they are building the homes which they expect to be built by 2031, and it's for that reason why they say they need to improve the buses. So this whole thing about Cambridge being a growing area, again, it's artificial. It's part of the overall scheme. And this woman is quite right. I think that they ought to actually take care of the houses and the population which already exists. And as we all know, they're not actually doing a terribly great job at that. Look at the potholes and look at the buses and everything, and how everything is lackadaisical and not working and not functioning quite properly, and how everything is so expensive. Nobody can get anything to work properly. How are you now going to introduce 33,000 extra homes into that equation if you can't even take care of what's here already? Anyway.
But if we are going to get more people, then the congestion is just going to get worse and the pollution is just going to get worse. We've got to seize the opportunity to do what we can now before it gets so bad.
It's so difficult to recruit here, and to charge them £1,200 extra on salaries, as somebody's mentioned before, which is really just really low, is not on.
As the same point again reiterated, you're putting another barrier on drawing people into the town. So, like, recruiting is already difficult. We've already got shortages of staff. It's already difficult to find staff to fully staff services and companies already. So this is only going to make it worse. A good point well made there from that man. Shapur from Mill Roads Traders Association here.
I just want to go back to that 65%, 65 hours of traffic. Who caused it? I'm just saying GCP, since they started close the roads, close all the side roads, doing all this improvement for the cycle lanes and all that. So the traffic, instead of getting better, is piling up and piling up. So we are adding more hours because they're trying to make a better future for us, but using that data to force us, say, look, we've got a gridlock, we have to do something about it. So the cause of the trouble, I can say, is GCP, because
he's reiterating the same point here. The actual congestion is being caused by the GCP, and that they're using that data to justify these plans, when in fact it's artificial and not real. But there's just an interesting point here that the presenter then makes in retort, and I just think it's just so weird.
I mean, the Greater Cambridge Partnership would say that actually this zone could be good for business and it would boost trade. What do you...
Now, that's something that I've heard before. The GCP would say that this zone will be good for business and could boost trade. The only thing I could do is to just question how on earth they came to that conclusion, because there's no way that any economical equation could possibly show that this will help businesses, local businesses, independent businesses. Any barrier or any blockage or any strangling of the roads or people's access to the town is going to harm trade, is going to harm business. People have got so many more options than the hassles of driving into town already, and you're just going to add another deterrent for them to come in. You can shop online, you can go to the retail parks, you could go to another town or whatever. Why would people want to come into town when there are other options if town is so much more expensive? And this whole argument, or any point that they make to say that this is actually going to improve business, I mean, I just want to pull them out and say, why, how have you come to that conclusion? I want to sit them down and say, look, show me your maths, show me your workings for that, because it's completely mental that you could ever think that this would help businesses on the ground. So there, why would you say that? That's part of the rhetoric of the GCP, and so far I don't think they've actually been called out on it.
What do you think it would do to your shop?
We're going to suffer because of all the deliveries, all the drop-off, everything is going to... I mean, I have to drop some computers outside the zone. I come from Trumpington.
And obviously, at the end of the day, as we know, this is how retail works. Every cost that a retailer has to incur gets passed on to the customer. The customer's product or the customer service becomes more expensive. There's only so far that can go. If the service becomes so expensive, the customer stops coming. If the customer stop coming, the company goes out of business. That's the basics of retail. We're trapped between two opposing sides of wholesale and the customer. If the wholesale and the overheads become too expensive, we have to pass those costs on to the customer. If the customer's side of it becomes too expensive for them, they stop coming. Simple as that. If we run out of customers, we go out of business. We die, essentially. So that is the result that this is going to have. I really don't think that the GCP or the people who are behind this comprehend that. They don't fathom it, and they don't seem to care either. That's one of the things which is so upsetting about this. This is the woman representing the Federation of Small Businesses with a bit of statistical research here.
So about 66% of small firms within Cambridge and who have access to Cambridge, they simply couldn't run their business without access to a vehicle. And similar to what you've been saying, around 85% of small firms, they are against a road-based user charge.
So it's probably worth here pointing out the stark contrast of the demographic of companies who are for this and who are against this. This is definitely a large companies, multinational companies, multi-million pound companies in favour, small, local, independent businesses not in favour. And the breakdown of that is around 80 to 85% against. That is the consistent experience when you talk to people. Local people don't want it. Small businesses don't want it. Lots of businesses couldn't afford to have it. Who's in favour of it? The university, the GCP, the big international businesses, the management of Addenbrooke's Hospital, who seem to be going against their nurses and their staff and things like that. This is what's happening. This is why people say that this is an attack or a tax on the poor, because that's literally what it is. Look at it. Examine what's happening. See what is happening. The rich, powerful companies, of which there are many in Cambridge, and have a very, very tight grip on the Cambridge economy, and have a lot of clout and have a lot of say in what happens. They are all trying to push this thing on the people, none of whom want it. And it's not just that we don't want it because we're just like, oh, I don't want to pay extra. It's that we literally can't afford it. You're going to drive people out of business by doing this. How can you push this thing through?
So I suppose my question really to everyone here on the panel is, should small businesses really be carrying the cost of the sustainable travel zone?
Good question.
There will have to be changes made to the proposals, and that's certainly my expectation, that there will be changes. That's the whole point of the consultation. You have to present people with something, and then it's vital that those 24,000 people who responded to the consultation are listened to.
And I absolutely understand the point about that, but
I don't think Daniel Zeichner does understand the point, but let's just give him the benefit of the doubt and listen to what he has to say.
I'd also say that a lot of businesses are wasting a lot of time stuck in queues in Cambridge. Someone was telling me about a plumber they were talking to the other day who was against the charge, and then she asked, how much time do you spend wasting going to calls? And he thought about it for a minute.
Is it about 65 hours a year by any chance?
A lot. And she said, well, how much better would it be if for a small charge you could actually get to those places quickly? He said, well, that's an interesting point. I might actually end up being better off rather than worse off.
Okay, that's a nice kind of abstract philosophical conundrum that he's presented there. But I mean, if it was a small charge, maybe it would be better. But let's have a look again at this guy's figures. A plumber drives a van. He's going to have to spend $3,700 extra a year. Is that really worth it? Dan Zeichner, do you understand? And that's only for companies who do go on deliveries and waste time in traffic. A lot of companies like shops and things like that, and dental practices and various are bound within an actual retail unit or a shop. So the actual congestion on the road doesn't directly affect them, but the loss of trade will. That was what you were being asked to respond to, and that is the point which you skirted around and avoided actually confronting. Because you're a politician, that's what you do. We see you, Dan.
So change is hard. People can't imagine a different future.
I really hate this argument as well. A lot of people say it's when they say change is hard, you know, but you're going to have to adjust. You're just going to have to adjust. I've seen that said so many times with the arguments for it. Society is just going to have to adapt. I'm afraid you're just going to have to get used to it. Now, in essence, that's just an inhumane argument. It's just saying, well, just get over it. You're just going to have to lump it. But you're not listening to all of the reasons why this isn't going to work for people. If all you can do is turn around and say, basically, you're going to have to sell your car and get a bike. You're just going to have to get used to it. That's not listening, and that's not caring. That is inhumane. That's why I hate that argument so much. And the only people who can say that are the people who are rich, wealthy, well-to-do, don't live outside town. They can cycle around. They don't have to drive and commute at 7 a.m. every day. They are the well-off. They are the kind of the CEOs and the politicians and whoever else. They are the only people who can actually make that argument. It's not right.
I'd say be brave and think we can do better than this than sitting in traffic queues all the time.
I want to bring our audience.
Just be brave, come on. Take a chance, give us all your money, and expect that we're going to change our ways, which we never have in your entire living experience. Come on, be brave, get with the programme, man.
Green Party is calling for an exemption for businesses that normally get small business rate relief. People have said the congestion charge is tax. This is actually a really good way to look at it, because there's a lot of consensus on what makes a good tax and what is a bad tax. A bad tax is one that costs a lot to collect. A bad tax is one that is regressive rather than progressive, that taxes people in the same way, regardless of their level of income.
Okay.
A bad tax is one that we can't afford to pay at the moment because we are in the middle of the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah. Ben has been to a city in Sweden, to Gothenburg, haven't you, Ben?
You might think a city on the west coast of Sweden, the home of the Volvo, home to around 600,000 people, may not have much in common with Cambridge, but could it?
Well, you said it, Ben. Gothenburg is a very, very different kettle of fish to Cambridge. There are so many differences that the comparison is practically void. Gothenburg has a population of 600,000. Gothenburg is the second largest city of Sweden. The congestion charge in Gothenburg is about 70p. Between 70p and £1.70, he said. The money goes to infrastructural changes. There has been a referendum in Gothenburg, although 57% of people were against. The council decided to keep it anyway, so it is literally a tax on people, an unpopular tax on people. Gothenburg has got a world-class bus system. It has a tram system. Getting around Gothenburg is a lot easier than Cambridge. I don't really see why they've decided to go to Gothenburg. I think it may be just to pad this thing out and make it seem like they've kind of done more research than they actually have. Anyway, I'm going to skip this whole bit here because it's totally unnecessary. Just out of interest, that Gothenburg piece, the Gothenburg charge raises about 70 million a year, which is a lot. Anyway, moving on to the next bit. We're getting towards the end now, thank God.
There we are, Anthony.
Thank you. And Cambridge is the fastest growing city in the UK. It has level...
I'm going to call out Anthony Painter here before we get into his actual question. I'm pretty sure the guy was a plant, to be honest with you. He's like one of those guys who they put in the audience to ask a question which entirely validates and supports the GCP's proposals. I mean, just listen to what he says. Cambridge is the fastest growing urban city in the country. That's the first point. I mean, is it? Again, is that really true? But listen to the rest of his piece.
Levels of pollution that are actually in excess of World Health Organization safe limits.
Pollution which is in excess of World Health Organization safe limits. That's not true, is it? No, it isn't. Carry on listening.
Whether it's going up or down. That's going to get worse. Even with electric vehicles, by the way, they may make some forms of pollution even worse because they're heavy. So the future is one in which things are going to get more difficult. Does the panel and the audience think it's fair that residents should pay the price in terms of worsening health, including child development?
Look at this woman here, nodding in agreement. She's the CamCycle executive director woman. She's in agreement with this one.
My child.
Is it fair that my child and your grandchild should pay the cost of bad air?
Unsafe roads and the economic costs of congestion because we fail.
Now here is the biggest telltale sign that I think that this guy is actually in some kind of... He's some way involved in the pro-congestion charge lobby. Look at his hand.
To take the tough but necessary decision to
Where have we seen that hand gesture before? That is the classic. This is the mark of a politician. He is in some way behind this. He's a plant. I'm sure of it. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure.
Bikes, walking and public transport.
Okay, Lucy Fraser. Lucy Fraser.
So obviously the whole question is designed to completely confirm and support the proposals of the GCP. How can we afford not to do this plan is the essence of his question.
What you've got to be careful of with pedestrianisation and with closure of roads, which we've talked about before, is that it doesn't just displace the traffic. There's got to be something that actually stops reduces the number of cars on the road.
So she said it, and she's kind of explicitly stated the underlying aim. You have to actually stop people using their cars. That is the main thrust of this agenda, and there is a whole background to this which people who have examined and researched enough will start to recognise. This picture is way bigger than just Cambridge, way bigger than just the UK. There is a drive, excuse my ironic use of the word drive, there is a effort, an agenda which is taking over the world, seemingly, the Western world anyway. They want to stop people using cars. For whatever reason, that is the underlying, that is the main motivation which is going on.
Towards net zero. So I think...
And net zero, there's another important phrase which you're going to hear a lot of, and we've already heard a lot of. It's all about reducing emissions, and this entirely justifies in their mind controlling people, removing people's freedoms, removing people's rights, charging people more, overriding democracy, not allowing people to have democratic referendums, ignoring the will of the people. it's justified because they say, we need to achieve net zero. Even though we're only a tiny little island here on the UK, and places like China are opening coal fuel stations, every year, we're not going to impact the CO2 levels on Earth at all. But what we can do is make ourselves feel like we are affecting things by creating a kind of a sort of a weird dystopian dictatorship which stops people from moving around, so that as politicians we can boast and say that we have achieved net zero, or we're on the way to achieving net zero, even though if you think about it with any amount of common sense, you know that that's impossible.
Back to the man with the plan. Is there anything that you've heard today? Lots of people making points. Is there anything that makes you think things do need to be changed, tweaked, adapted?
I think it's been a really helpful discussion, and it really adds to the debate. The whole nature of our proposals, we put out and said, tell us what you think. What's resonated tonight for me is a recognition there's a problem, and actually a real sort of sense that public transport alternatives, the right public transport alternative, needs to come first.
There's an interesting interpretation that Peter's taken from it. He's specifically taken the whole conversation to mean sort of confirmation and validation that there is a problem that needs to be solved. They do need to improve the buses somehow. Forget about all the problems that people have raised and the fact that people need to be listened to and want to be listened to, and maybe that this whole proposal isn't the right thing for Cambridge at all. Forget about that. Peter's saying that this is useful for the debate to confirm that there is a problem that seriously needs to be dealt with. Now, I would like to point out here that this debate isn't really fruitful at all, because it won't go anywhere. If this was the lead up to what might be like a public campaign towards a referendum or some kind of independent opinion poll which is going to inform the policy, then that would be great. But the fact is that the consultation is closed and that they are going to make the decision on their own in June, and they're not going to share the results of the consultation with us in the meantime. So this whole thing on the BBC has been completely almost frivolous. It is an opportunity for the BBC to gain some kind of airtime. Not that they need to gain airtime. The BBC to gain some kind of veil of legitimacy as journalists, which they are not. Is given the GCP, or mainly Peter Blake, another opportunity to present his version of the situation. Is given the public the false appearance that their voice matters, which it doesn't, and all of this boils down to ultimately nothing in the end, other than just another way for us to distract ourselves and kind of think about something which we're not going to be able to affect in the end. And he says, interestingly enough, this.
So during the consultation, we said we would expect by the summer of 2023 to come back with a full analysis of the consultation and proposals on next steps. We're going to keep to that timeline.
Now, that is an interesting thing for him to say, because, I mean, that's not actually true. As Anna Bailey from the East Cambs District Council so astutely observed just earlier on tonight, she points out this fact that actually that isn't the time frame that they set out. Is it me, or is Peter Blake rewriting history? On the BBC debate, he said, during the consultation, we said we would expect by the summer of 23 to come back with full analysis of the consultation and proposals on the next steps. We're going to stick to that timeline. But here's the timeline that was in the proposal. 2023, the final decision was going to be made here, sometime in May. Anyway, just an interesting thing that I wanted to point out there. I mean, you can't expect anything less from him. He is on the BBC. He is the man who this whole thing is resting upon. And he is the one who is going to take all of the blame if anything goes wrong, I'm afraid to say. He's in a sort of an awkward spot, a difficult situation, difficult position. There isn't an awful lot of confidence in him or his plans. And I'm going to hold him, and I think everybody should hold him to the fact that he needs to stick to his word, in that they're going to, A, listen to the consultation, take on board what people have said. 85% of people and businesses opposed to this scheme has to be acknowledged and listened to. They need to put the bus improvements in place before any road charging scheme happens, and that is a tall order on its own. So he has got some hell of a task ahead of him, and I don't envy him at all. Anyway, on that point, I will round off, and I'm going to use the BBC's canned applause to end this thing. Let's go for it.
Now needs to be made, but maybe the controversy won't end there. We'll see. From all of us here at the Perth School in Cambridge, goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. That was it. For what it's worth, does it matter? Does it mean anything? You know, I can't say. I'll let you decide. I mean, it gave me something to do anyway for the last couple of hours. Anyway, let's look forward to what's happening next. There is an event on next Wednesday at the Corner House, a social for people to gather and mingle and, carry on getting to know each other. I'm looking forward to that. I'll see you guys there. Of course, there's going to be another march on the 26th of February. There is also a march in Oxford on the 18th of February, and that's going to be very exciting and interesting to visit, because that is where the Cambridge situation ties in with not only the Oxford situation, but there's one in Bath, there's one in Bristol, they're all over the country, in fact. And not only are they all over the country, they're all over the world now. And it all links up to this thing, this big global green agenda, which is hooked up in some weird, strange way to the WEF, the World Economic Forum. That's something that I'm reluctant to talk about really too much, because I don't know an awful lot about it, and that's when you start to sound like a conspiracy theorist. So you're not supposed to really talk about that, although it is happening and it is true. So there you have it. Keep up the good work, folks. Keep on the pressure, keep on the reading, keep on the everything else, and that's it.